an identity around something without judging it first. Okay, so you have to judge something before forming an identity around it. It's impossible, right? Like if you're listening to a song, right? So let's say that you play a song. Now you're experiencing the song, which means it's real and it's true. So the second that you play the song, you have this knowledge belief unconsciously that this thing is real. And then what you're going to do is you're going to decide whether you like the song or not. And if you like the song, you're going to start tying your identity to it. So if I take one of my favorite songs, which is called Weekend by Flume, like I know it exists. I have knowledge that that thing exists. I have judgment around it of like, it's a good song. I really love that song. And the second I say it becomes part of my identity. And your judgment and your identity are very separate things. Because if someone if someone disagrees or attacks, one of your belief systems, they're either usually attacking your knowledge, your judgment, or your self-image. So if someone disagrees with you, if I say there's a chair there and someone says there's not a chair there, they're disagreeing with me on the knowledge level. But if we both agree there's a chair there and we both agree the chair is good, then we agree on the judgment level. But if we both agree, if I say I want to sit in that chair and the other person says I do not want to sit in that chair, now we've got two different belief systems, right? So pretty important. When we observe, so you can't form an identity around something without judging it first, and it can't be judged without knowledge exists first. When we observe components of reality, we almost always observe them through this trifecta of beliefs. Now, this isn't always the case, right? It is very much possible to observe something. I need to change this, I think. It's impossible to observe something. Yeah, okay. So it's impossible to observe something without making a knowledge and judgment-based belief. This is pretty much always true. Like, if you look at something and you observe something, you always have the knowledge belief because it's there, but usually you're almost always going to judge it as well. So, if I look at something and I look at the chair, I immediately unconsciously judge it as grey and as plastic and as slightly uncomfortable. That's the chair I'm looking at outside. And I do that all without actually articulating it sometimes, right? So beliefs are usually articulated statements of perceived truth, but a lot of the time you can kind of articulate them unconsciously and just know that it is what it is without saying it, right? And it's entirely possible to make an observation without judging what we've observed or relating to it. So what this means is it's very unlikely, but usually what happens if you observe something is you form the knowledge-based belief, then you form a judgment-based belief, and then you form a self-image belief. But sometimes you can form a knowledge-based belief alone. Sometimes you can form a knowledge-based belief and a judgment-based belief and not identify with it. Okay? This is entirely possible. You can observe something, you make some judgments about it, and not tie your identity to it at all. Okay? If I give you an example in my life, what's an example I can give you? Let's take a song, like let's take a famous song, like I don't know, I can't even think of an example now. Okay, let me give you an example. Like let's take the movie Titanic, right? I don't really identify with the Titanic. I wouldn't say that I like or dislike the Titanic. I would say it's a good movie. Like I could look at the Titanic and say it's a good movie, but because I'm not using the word I, me, my, or we, or our, it's not an identity, right? So this is the nuance, is just you can say that things are good or bad, but the second that you use the word I is the second that you tie your identity to it. And so I don't necessarily identify with the Titanic. If I said the Titanic makes me sad, now that's an identity-based belief because I use the word me. And I definitely do identify with the Titanic. Like it's kind of impossible not to know anything about it because I was literally trying to explain it, being like, yeah, I kind of like Titanic. Like, of course I'm identifying with it. But there are times that you can have experiences where you don't identify. Like, for example, let's say that you walk past a house, right? Let's use an easy example. Let's say that you walk past a bus. No, easy example. Let's say that you have a taxi driver, right? And you get in a taxi and he drops you off, and you know he exists because he's there, so you form knowledge-based belief, and maybe you've judged him a little bit, but maybe you walk out the taxi without any identity around whether you like him or not. Or maybe like you walk past a house, down the street, in some random street, and you look at the house, you don't really think anything of it, you don't identify with it, you see it, it's there unconsciously, and that's it. It's entirely possible to make observations without identity. In the same way that maybe you go to a shop and you buy a bottle of water, and it exists, and maybe you think the water is nice, but you don't necessarily throw it away and think about it and identify with it. Do you know what I mean? So it's possible. So here's your paradigm, the structure of your paradigm, and essentially how this thing works and how it's structured. So your paradigm is basically the lens through which you see the world, like a pair of glasses, and it's broken down into your worldview and your identity. And your worldview is basically everything that you know to be true, or everything that you know exists, right? Because really, the things you know to be true are your beliefs. So everything that you know exists, everything you believe you know about what you know exists, and then you have your identity, which is all your self-image beliefs. So everything that you think exists, what you think about those things, and how you identify with them, all of that comprised together creates your paradigm. So when we make an observation and create a subjective reality, the reason that our reality is subjective and the reason that we have different realities is because we have different paradigms, which is because we have different worldviews and identities, which is because we have different belief systems. So now I'm going to give you something called the black flower analogy, which will really give you a visual representation of how your paradigm works. So, okay, what we have here is a component of objective reality. So let's say that this painting of a black flower, this is a component of objective reality. It exists in objective form. There we go. So then we have a human existing with consciousness. And what happens, step 3, is the component of objective reality enters the immediate sensory or imaginary awareness of the human. So this person walks into the art gallery and they can see the black flower on the canvas. And what happens is the human observes the component of objective reality using his or her paradigm. So what this means is the person looks at the canvas and they look at it through their paradigm, and then they basically hallucinate what they've seen. That's kind of how this works, right? And what happens is basically the human accepts or rejects the experience as true or false. So 99% of the time, if not 99.99999% of the time, everything that we observe we accept as true because we've observed it. So if you walk past a house, or if you get in a car and see an Uber driver, he's real, he's there, right? So by default, pretty much everything that you observe from a knowledge perspective is you perceive as true. Because it's kind of impossible to perceive something unless you accept it's true in the first place, right? So what you would say is that's a black flower. I can see a black flower. And then what you do, after you've made, so this is a knowledge forming, right? This is a knowledge-based belief forming. So you look, you see, you believe. That's a black flower, knowledge-based belief, done, right? Now, really, the knowledge-based belief here, I've made a slight mistake, would be that's a flower. Because black is a judgment, okay? You're making a judgment of this thing, but I'm sure you can let that slide. Now, the second thing is the human judges the component of reality they've just experienced, and they will do this most of the time. Most of the time we make judgments, not always. So, the human will look at the flower and be like, that flower is very beautiful. And we'll start forming judgment-based beliefs about this flower. So, that flower is black. That flower is beautiful. That flower is bad. You would find that flower in Denmark. You start making all these connections and judgments about this thing, which are statements, articulated statements of perceived truth. And you don't have to articulate them and say them out loud. You just have to think them or perceive them. And then the human decides their relationship with the component of reality they've just experienced. And once again, most of the time, but not always. So this is where your identity-based belief forms. So, you make all these judgments, and then you'll say something like, in fact, that's the most beautiful flower I've ever seen. Or, I would love to have that flower in my garden. Or, my mum used to grow those flowers. Or, when I was in school, we used to pick those flowers. Or, in the future, our society will love these flowers, right? Any word that denotes you, whether it's collective or individual, so I, me, what, my, our, whatever, right? Identity-based beliefs. And so this is how beliefs form. So objective reality exists, a human exists. The two things You're not, right? They came from a stimulus. Something entered your awareness. You then formed judgments and perspectives about them, and now you have beliefs, right? So let me give you some examples of the three types of belief. So let's take the component of reality of your mother, okay? So the woman that is your mother. Now, the knowledge would be, my mother is over there pacing around. So, if you just basically observe that your mum is walking around the kitchen, then that's knowledge. You know that your mother is pacing around the kitchen. If you then said, she looks tired today, now you're making a judgment because, she looks tired to you. To somebody else, she might not look tired. So the second that something's up for debate, really, if anything, pacing around isn't appropriate because, if I could say my mum's pacing around, someone else says she's running around. It's a matter of perspective, right? If I then said I love my mother, now that's an identity-based belief, okay? Because I'm saying I. Now, let's take another component. Let's say Pepsi, so the drink, right? So let's say knowledge. Pepsi is a drink that can be served in a can. That's knowledge, right? That's just an observation of the objective nature of the world, right? And if I went on to say Pepsi is fizzy, well, that's judgment. I'm judging Pepsi as fizzy. Anytime that you describe something, you're judging it. And if I then said Pepsi makes me feel sick, that's how I identify with Pepsi. And don't get me wrong, individual components can have hundreds, if not thousands, of beliefs associated with them. So, another component we might talk about is money, and we'll talk about this a lot throughout this program, is money, right, which is what you're here to make. And, you probably have, you know it exists, so, you could just say money exists. That's the knowledge, right? The first step to making money is knowing it exists, right? So, it exists, but then you're going to have a ton of judgment-based beliefs and self-image-based beliefs about money that are contradicting your ability to make it. So maybe you have a self-image belief around money of, like, I find it hard to make money, or, my family has always been poor, or, my ability to make money is hindered, or I don't have enough time to make money. All these, anything that interjects you into the equation is a self-image-based belief, and it could be about money. And you'll have lots of judgment-based beliefs about money as well. So, you might say money is bad, or money doesn't grow on trees, or money is hard to come by, or money needs to be, it takes money to make money. All these statements that you have are perceived statements of truth that are basically embedded into your paradigm. And when you see money in that way, like, how you see something is how you will act it out and how you'll behave with it. Because, if your self-image is I love my mother, then you're going to treat your mother well. And, if your judgment is my mum looks tired, then you're going to go and offer her, like, rest or something. But if your self-image is I hate my mother, then you're going to treat her horribly. And if your judgment is my mum looks like she's got loads of energy today, then you're not going to offer to do the dishes or something. So depending on what you think you've observed and how you think you're related to that observation is how you will behave. And so when we take the component of money, if you fundamentally believe that it's impossible to make and that you're never going to make it, then you're going to act those beliefs out. And we're going to talk about this later in this video and more. But That's the point for now. So the component, mouse and cat interaction. So let's say that let's say that you see a mouse and a cat, and let's say that you see the mouse ran away from the cat. So let's say you're sat in a park and there's a rat and there's a cat and the rat just run away from the cat, right? Or the mouse. So you've observed that and it's knowledge. So I now have empirical knowledge that the mouse ran away from the cat. I could then judge the situation and form judgment-based beliefs about my knowledge. I could say the mouse was tiny and the cat was too slow. So these are judgments. If I then went on to said, I'm glad the mouse survived, I've now identified with the knowledge and with the judgment. Okay? So I formed an identity around a component of reality. Hitler, right? Not an easy topic. But let's say that they do the component of Hitler, right? In reality, because even though Hitler's not real anymore, Hitler's real, right? But he's not alive. So Hitler is real in the sense that we can perceive him in the tangible past reality. So remember, things don't have to be here anymore for them to be real. Hitler's very much real. He's not alive and he's not here in the present, but he's part of this reality, because you've got to realize that reality is mapped across the dimension of time, and therefore everything that has happened is real and is still part of reality. Just because something doesn't exist anymore doesn't mean it's not part of reality. So Hitler, knowledge. You could say Hitler existed as the leader of the Nazi party and he had a moustache. Right? So we're not saying it. This is just knowledge, because you can't judge Hitler if you don't know he exists, right? And you can't judge Hitler's moustache if you don't know he had a moustache, right? So I'm not saying here is he had a short moustache. I'm not saying the Nazis are bad. I'm just saying it exists, right? What I could then do is make the judgment that Hitler was morally wrong, and Hitler's moustache was not very nice, whatever, right? Although there were worse qualities to him than his moustache, I'm quite sure. But then your self-image could be, I think Hitler is the worst person ever. So then you're choosing to identify in some way with the component. Okay? There's a lot of examples here. I think you kind of get the point. We'll go through a few more. So let's say there's a girl. A component is a girl called Sarah, right? And you say there's a girl upstairs. Now, once again, with blue hair, I need to get rid of this, because blue hair is a judgment. How blue is her hair? Is it dark blue? Is it light blue? It's up for interpretation, right? Someone else might think it's green, so we have to be careful there. But if I said there's a girl upstairs, objectively there is a girl, and she's above me, and it takes some vertical motion to reach her, and she's upstairs. Judgment could be she's cute. I'd like to go and talk to her. Could be self-image, right? You can pause and look at these examples for further examples as to how we form knowledge, judgment, and self-image beliefs about components. But yeah, for example, let's take Easy Grow. So Easy Grow is a component of reality, right? It's our next product, right? That you're going to buy when you get results. And I could say knowledge that Easy Grow is Charlie Morgan's client acquisition program. That's knowledge. That's what I've observed. And the judgment could be Easy Grow looks amazing, or Easy Grow looks terrible. I mean, you can make your own mind up, right? And your self-image could be I'm going to invest in Easy Grow. So this happens a lot of the time with people with this program, where a lot of people come in and they sort of decide that they're like, I really like Easy Grow, and I think Easy Grow's like my thing, and I'm going to buy it. They're forming an identity around it before they've even finished the program. And that's a fine thing to do, and you can do that. I'm not saying what you should. I'm not going to tell you what you should and shouldn't identify with. That's not my job here. I'm just making you aware that you do, right? So that's that. Amazon rainforest, knowledge. The Amazon rainforest is a rainforest that exists in Brazil. Okay, just knowledge. That's just a piece of information, a statement of perceived truth that is accurate, right, and aligned with the objective nature of the world. And if I went on to say it's huge and it's the biggest rainforest of them all, then I'm making a judgment. Even though this is knowledge, insofar as it is kind of a fact, it's still judgment. It's not knowledge, because to somebody else's subjective experience could be that the Congo rainforest is the biggest rainforest of them all. Because if all you've ever known is the Congo rainforest, and you don't even know the Amazon exists, then so any time that it's up for dispute is pretty much when it's judgment. You could even make the argument that saying it exists in Brazil is also judgment, because somebody else might think it exists in Colombia or something. Maybe it does. I actually don't know. Anyway, being an idiot. If I then said we're responsible for the deforestation of it, then that's self-image belief, because I'm including the word we, right? So this is basically how your paradigm forms. It's a collection of belief systems, and when you make an observation, you use one of these, usually most of these belief systems, to basically feel out what's there. This is how you see the world, and this is how reality manifests to you. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is our paradigms vary, because the thing is we all have we all have broadly similar knowledge to a degree. Although the interesting thing about this is knowledge gives you a huge advantage, because you're going through this program, right? And in real time, you're learning new things that you didn't know before. And therefore, by watching the last hour of this video, or by sitting down and watching this video, you have changed your paradigm and acquired new knowledge. So this video in live real time has just altered your paradigm and perception, which means that your subjective experience and the way that you perceive the world has just shifted. And I've just changed your paradigm by giving you new knowledge, because now you have knowledge that paradigms exist and that the belief systems exist and that you're responsible for them. And that's a huge, huge component now. And now what's going to happen is when you make new observations in reality about things, those observations are going to be now biased by this knowledge. And so this is why knowledge is power. Is because what knowledge allows you to do is, if it's accurate and correct, and we'll talk about accuracy and correction in the next video. I'm going to teach you how to be right every single time, and how to know if you're right, how to know if you're wrong, and correct your paradigm. But what knowledge does is it basically gives you, it's a tool you can use to perceive things in a way that is more suitable towards your goals. Okay? So your subjective reality is a personal reflection of objective reality. Everyone has a different subjective reality. So the cool thing is that some people have similar subjective realities. So, for example, let's say that you're an online consulting entrepreneur in Easy Grow making $100K a month, right? Well, you're going to have a very similar subjective reality and experience to other online consulting entrepreneurs making 100K a month because you're making the same amount of money. In the same way that if you're a doctor and you're a pediatrician and you work with kids, then what's going to happen is you're going to have a very similar paradigm to lots of other people on the planet who are pediatricians. But everyone has a slightly different one. Just because you have the same line of work and it might not mean you have the same religion or the same health or the same family or the same relationship with music or food. Everyone's different. And this is why people haven't lived such different lives. Everyone has their own unique perspective on reality, and your life is truly a reflection of your paradigm and fundamentally what you believe to be true. Your beliefs create your reality. It's as simple as that. What you believe to be true usually is. And like I said before, as long as it is in alignment with the objective nature of the world and it abides by the laws of nature and physics, then it can be true. Because you might right now believe that making money is hard and impossible and really difficult, and therefore you don't try. But to me, making money is easy and straightforward and really simple. And the only difference between you and me is I've experienced making money and you haven't. And that might seem like a bit of a catch-22 chicken and egg because well, how do I experience making money if I don't believe it's true? So how do I create an experience without that? Well, the answer to that question will be coming in the next video. I'm going to explain it, and it's going to become really clear how you can create experiences to manipulate your belief systems, to change your paradigm, to ultimately change the way the world manifests to you, so you can change your behavior. Now, one thing I want to tell you before we move on here is the entire, and I want you to just pay attention, snap out of this flow mode that you're in, and just really consciously pay attention to this. The entire point of this mindset module, not just this video, but the entire video series, is for me to change your behavior. That's the only point. The only reason that I've put 6 months of work into this mindset module, probably more, is to change your behavior. That's it. The whole point is for me to get you to do the work. That's the only reason that I'm making this content. I'm not making this content to, help you understand things, and the only reason I'm making it is so that I get you to do the work. That's my entire objective with this week 2 mindset training, is to change your behavior and get you to do the work. Okay? And the thing is that your paradigm informs your behavior. And so you act out your paradigm, you act out your belief systems, and all of the behavior that you partake in and the actions that manifest from your body and your mind are a direct result of your beliefs and your paradigm. And so the reason I'm explaining this is not to just give you some woo-wah hippie thing, it's to inform you of a tool that you can use to change your behavior. Because if you don't change your behavior and if you don't change how you act, nothing's going to change you. Your actions and your behavior determine your results and what you get. But the thing that's downline of your behavior is your paradigm and your belief systems, because you will act them out, okay? We'll talk about this in a minute. So let me give you an example. So let's say that we, once again, how do paradigms vary? So once again, let's say that we have this flower, right? This black flower. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you here just so you can read this a little bit more. So let's say that this type of flower is highly poisonous for humans to consume if it's black. But if it's any other color, it's safe for humans to consume. Okay? So we've got this black flower. If you eat the flower and it's black, you die. But if you eat it and it's any other color, you're going to be fine. Now, let's say that we have human A and human B. So we have two people with different consciousnesses, different paradigms. And what happens is they both come into contact with the black flower. Okay? Now, here's the thing. Let's say that person A has what we would call a yellow paradigm. And what this means is that when they look, they're kind of colorblind, right? So when they see something that's black, they perceive it as yellow. And let's say that person B has a blue paradigm. So when they perceive what is black, they perceive blue. Okay, the easiest way to see it is like being colorblind, right? So what's going to happen is objectively on the board, there's a black flower. Like the true objective nature of reality and of the world is that this flower is black. But the problem is that these two humans, they have paradigms that are out of alignment with the objective nature of the world, and they're not seeing things accurately. And so what happens here is this person has a yellow paradigm and this person has a blue paradigm. So this person sees a yellow flower and this person sees a blue flower. And the problem is because this is what they've observed, because this is what their paradigm informs them of, they become incredibly convinced that what they've observed is true. And so the human accepts the experience as true, and the human accepts the experience as true. So this person thinks that's a yellow flower, and this person thinks it's a blue flower. Even though the flower's black, they're both wrong, but they think they're right. To them, they are right. Okay? So this is the thing is we have two forms of right and wrong. We have subjectively right and wrong, and we have objectively right and wrong, right? And so in person A's mind, he's right, and in person B's mind, he's right, but objectively, they're both wrong. And what happens now is, the human judges the component of the reality using their paradigm. So, if this person, the whole point of this story is that the flower's black, and we know that if the flower's black, it's not safe for humans to consume. But what's happened is these people, because they've got faulty paradigms, have perceived a yellow and a blue flower. And so in their mind, it's safe for this flower to be eaten because they've seen a yellow and a blue one. And so now what they're going to do is they're going to form a judgment-based belief, which is this color of flower is not poisonous because they think they've seen yellow and blue, right? And so what's going to happen is basically, they're going to identify with eating it, like I'm going to eat this flower, and they're both going to die because they've eaten a black flower, but it was actually yellow for A and blue for B. And so they thought they were eating something safe, but the truth is that they weren't. They were eating something unsafe, and they couldn't see that because they were blinded by their paradigms, right? And this is basically kind of the way that everyone operates. And it's a shame to see, this is why people are poor. This is why people are out of shape. Any sort of suffering you have in your life that doesn't have to exist because it's in your control. If you've got cancer or something, God help, that's not necessarily because of your paradigm, or it could be depending on your behaviors, right? But if you're broke or out of shape or have a bad relationship or whatever, it's usually because of your paradigm. Because if there's somebody else on the planet who has an opposite situation to you and a good situation to you, then there's a way to get that done, right? And so these people would die. Because what happens is we act out our beliefs. So if you say, that's a yellow flower, that flower's safe, and I'm going to eat that damn flower, then you're going to eat it. And you're going to die because you actually ate a black flower, but you thought you were eating a yellow one, right? And so the same thing is true in business. Another example here is the blind man and the elephant. Because we do not see the world objectively for what it is, we often misinterpret reality and fail to see the pure truth. This gets us in all sorts of trouble, as demonstrated above. So here we have an example called the blind man and the elephant. So if you take 6 blindfolded men and individually lead them up to different parts of an elephant, they're each going to have a different subjective experience and therefore reality. So, imagine this for a second. Like, you blindfold these 6 dudes and, you put them in the room and then you bring an elephant in. And then what happens is you tell the people, like, reach out and tell me what you feel. Well, person A over here is going to touch the tusk and they're going to be like, oh, there's a spear. There's this spear that's sort of moving around slightly. So he's blindfolded. He can't see the whole thing. He can only see what he immediately feels, right? And then this person down here is like going to think it's a snake because this person can just feel the trunk, like the end of the trunk. And like, oh God, I'm feeling a snake. And then this person with the leg is going to be like, oh, it's a tree. And the person with the back is going to think it's a wall. And then we've got this guy, he's going to be feeling the ears flapping back and forth, thinking it's a fan. And the person at the end here thinks it's a rope. He's on tail. But this is kind of how people make observations throughout life. And this is why, we as humans tend to be really wrong about what we perceive, is because seldom do we have the opportunity to have what you could call a holistic observation where you see the big picture, you see the whole picture. Because, to this person here who's touching the tusk, this is a spear. Like, their reality is such that this is a spear. That's actually what they think. They don't think it's an elephant, they think it's a spear, right? And, these people afterwards, if you took the elephant out of the room and you took their blindfolds off and you asked all of them to talk about what they saw, these guys would go to war with each other because we defend our paradigms to the death. Like, your worldview and your identity, you protect that thing literally with your life. And if you don't believe me, well, look at any war or suicide or anything. Like, the reason people die for non, biological reasons is for identity. It's like, someone invades your country. It's like, I've got to defend my country. It's like, we do not like being attacked when it comes to worldview and identity. And I know why, and I'm going to explain it in the next video. But yeah, if you've got these guys to like talk about it, like one guy would be like, yeah, that was a rope, guys. The other person's going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? It's a tree. How the hell can you say that's a rope? And then what's going to happen is they're going to start arguing, like, and they're going to start fighting. And then like maybe even one of them is going to die about like, no, it's a fan. Oh God. And then we just become incredibly emotionally attached to our observations, which makes sense because you can't blame any of these people. Like, if you're blindfolded up to an elephant and you touch the tusk, you're going to be like, yeah, that was kind of felt like a blunt spear. And then you're going to defend that because that's literally what you've observed. You don't know any different. So the same thing is true with like people who grow up in poverty or like poor families. I didn't grow up in poverty or a poor family, but I grew up in sort of a middle class environment where my dad had a successful financial career, and he was a very good father. He took good care of us. He made sure we never went hungry, and we lived in a nice house and stuff. But I was never like rich, right? But he educated me on money and stuff, which was helpful. But my point here is that a lot of people when they're in poverty and when they grow up poor, or if let's say that you bought a course ages ago and you got scammed, and now you think online money is a scam, like that's like buying one course and being scammed, and then thinking that all of the courses are a scam is like going up to an elephant blindfolded, touching its leg and thinking you found a tree, but then becoming adamant that you found a tree. Like, until you've got the full picture, it's tough. And this is the real problem, is a lot of people, we make huge mistakes. Like one observation one time becomes your ultimate reality, and you will now act it out, and it's a real shame. So, another example, right? So if I asked you, like, what does this look like? Okay, so this thing that you can see on the screen in yellow and in blue, what are these? What does this look like to you? What shape do you think you're observing here? What shape do you think objectively exists? Right? You obviously, like, it's a circle. You can see a circle, clear as day, that's a circle. It couldn't be anything else. Same thing is true here. Like, what about this? What is this? What shape are you observing here? What's the objective reality here? Well, it's a square. Of course it's a square. Like, you can literally see circle and square. I mean, you could argue like a rectangle or something, but it's a quadrilateral shape and a circle shape, right? Well, the thing is, it's actually neither. Because what this really is like a sort of tube with two different types of reflection. And so when you zoom out and you have some more context, now you can actually make a more objective observation. But a lot of people would just like fight to the death over these two things because they're never going to see the big picture, right? Depending on your point of reference and the availability of information, it's incredibly likely you make a mistake about what you're observing. This is because your paradigm is fundamentally limited to your sensory and imaginary experiences. So, all I've given you, the only sensory input you had for this decision was what you saw on the screen here, right? So it's not really your fault that you were wrong, it was just your observation. And we're wrong about stuff all the time, right? And you aren't omnipotent and godlike. Yeah, this might be achieving omniscience, right? But you don't see everything. You're constrained and bound by what you've experienced, and you can't comprehend anything beyond this. And this is why I feel sorry for people that have never been exposed to the right information before, because, like, you're wrong. Like, about, like, all of these assumptions you have, all these judgments, all these identities, all these things, they're wrong. Like, maybe you believe it's hard to make money. Maybe you believe that making money online is impossible. Maybe you believe that getting to 6 figures is not going to happen. Like, these are just, all these are just your beliefs that have been formed and built based off of your experiences. And your experiences, remember, are constrained to your immediate sensory awareness and your imagination. And if you've never experienced wealth before, or knowledge, or information about money, it's not your fault. Now, it is, because your beliefs are your responsibility and your mind is your responsibility, but you didn't really have the knowledge that was even the case. So now that you're aware, you're responsible, right? But even up until now, you've been responsible. But you get my point. It's like, you're wrong about a lot of things, but that's because you didn't know any better. You just didn't. It's like, it's like thinking that making money is online is hard. It's like, it's all you've seen. How can you not? Of course you think it. How can you possibly not? Like, it's all you've ever known. Like, if right now you're broke and, you haven't got a business and you're not making money, then, well, that's your experience, right? So of course you think that's how the world works. And of course that's your paradigm. And of course that's how reality manifests to you, right? But if you have the full picture and you have the information on how to make the money, like, imagine I said to you, I was like, okay, well, you think making money is hard right now, but if I gave you the right mentorship and the right information and I told you exactly what to do and how to do it, and it would work for thousands of other people and you did it, do you think you'd make money? Well, the answer is obviously yes. So this is the thing, is you can change your paradigm if you change your experiences and information, and we'll talk about this. By the way, I know that I keep saying, like, we'll talk about this, and, you know, I'm going to explain this in later videos and stuff, but the point I'm making is I understand how sort of cognitively groundbreaking some of this information can be, and I just want to reassure you that everything will be fully explained and everything will be fully looped and full circled and completely comprehensible by this one video is contextualized against like 5 more to come, right? So it's important that you understand that even if it isn't clicking right now, it will click by the time you finish the module, because I don't want you getting confused. So the same thing is true for all components of reality. So, you know, let's say, imagine for a second here that someone has grown up in poverty their entire life, right? They have no internet access and they live in a rural village with no way of ever experiencing anything even slightly resembling abundance and wealth. So this person all their life has never seen anything to do with wealth. No internet, no car, nothing, no city, just donkeys and a farm, and they've never seen wealth before. Well, that person will live and die thinking that poverty is just the way the world works and that nothing else is possible. They won't even try to get rich or get out of poverty because they don't even perceive it as an option. Like, how can you possibly even start to think about trying to get rich if you don't even know that the concept of rich exists? All you've ever known is, you know, poor and poverty. And to you, that's just the way the world works. Like, it's not even that bad because you don't know there's an opposite. You just see it as like, oh, it kind of is what it is, right? This is why, by the way, like, people throughout history suffer immeasurably, but not as bad as you might think, because they didn't know any different. So, like, you know, when you think about like peasant farmers and stuff, like a lot of them just, like, they lived and died in this sort of paradigm vacuum where there was no other option, there was no other like escape. That was just how the world worked. And because there was no contrast, there was significantly less suffering. The second that you know that there's a better way to do something or a better way to live and you're not living it, that's when you start feeling pain, right? But if you don't experience it, it doesn't exist. Like, if you've never experienced wealth before, it doesn't exist to you. It doesn't. Another example. Let's say that someone's grown up all their life overweight. So they've overeaten, they're fat. Well, they've been told by their parents and doctors over and over that their condition is genetic and that they will always be overweight no matter what. Well, this person will live and die thinking that being overweight is just the way they are and won't attempt to make a change because that's the hand they were dealt. They won't even try to lose weight because they didn't even perceive the option of healthiness. So, you know, let's say that they had a bad doctor and that doctor was incentivized to just sell them pills to like suppress their appetite and make money off them. And that doctor had a bad incentive and the doctor was wrong, because doctors are wrong all the time, sometimes, right? All the time. And like, you know, that person's paradigm was just shaped around this one doctor's visit, and now their parents believe it. And now they've got this easy victimhood out of just like, oh, it's just my genes. I'm fat because of my genes, because of my genetic condition that my doctor prescribed me with to sell me pills. And he was wrong because he didn't pay attention in class, because humans are infallible, and I should realize that. Well, now you're going to live and die fat because you didn't even perceive that losing weight is an option. It's like your paradigm's so important. This is how your paradigm works. Your behavior, your actions, your decisions are fundamentally constrained and limited by your paradigm. All of your experiences form all of your beliefs, and all of your beliefs form your paradigm. And therefore, your reality in your life is a fundamental product of your experiences. And if you don't experience something, it's not real. And don't worry, like I said, we're going to have solutions. Don't worry. But this is the Mark Twain quote. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Often the thing that messes you up and gets you into trouble in life and keeps you poor and fat and unhealthy and all the other bad things is you think that the world is a certain way. You just, like, I completely understand, because I had the same thing with money. I had so much doubt. I was like, no one's going to buy from me. I'm not going to sell anything without, no one's going to buy if I haven't got testimonials. Like, all these beliefs were coming out, and I would act out. I wouldn't be successful. The second that I changed my belief systems and paradigm, and I started seeing the world in a different way, then I changed my behavior. And that is the key. We change your behavior. But the only way I can change your behavior is by changing your paradigm. And the only way that I can, well, basically, I want to change your reality. But the only way I can change your reality is by changing your behavior. But the only way I can change your behavior is by changing your paradigm. And the only way I can change your paradigm is by changing your belief systems. And the only way I can change your belief systems is by changing your experiences. And the only way I can do that is by teaching you how it all works and then helping you change them. So this is with intent. This is not just some theory, right? This is all ending up with a goal. Right. So what I have here is something called the reality ladder, which basically explains in linear format how your paradigm creates your reality. Okay? So the first thing we have here is your life and your reality. So the question is like, well, where does your reality come from? Where does your life, like, obviously life I'm using as a term here to denote your experience of reality, right? So your reality comes from the sum of every single action you've ever taken. So I'm going to let that sink in for a second. Where you are right now in life is the sum of every action you've ever taken ever, at least financially or health-wise or whatever you're trying to fix it, right? If you've got meningitis, unfortunately, it's very unlikely that, let's say you're born with meningitis and now you die. It's like, that's not your fault, right? That wasn't because of your action. So there are some exceptions to this. Some things can happen that interfere. But for the most part, for the majority rule, 99% of your life, everything you have is because of what you've done, right? And so that means that your reality is the sum of all your actions. And it really is. You might not think it is, but it really is. Like, everything that you've ever done and every action you've ever taken, every decision, like all of these things that you've done have just built what you've got now. How could it be any other way? Like, we know from week one and from the Genesis videos that, I don't mean that in the biblical sense, by the way, but we know from like the foundations of business Genesis videos that that your life is kind of like this collection of actions. Like, it's cause and effect, right? It's Hegel's dialectic. It's cause and effect. And so every action you've done, aggregated over time, creates your reality, which is why we need to change your actions, because a synonym or another word for action is behavior. So every behavior you've ever done, right? So the question is well, where the hell do your actions come from? Because, it's all good and well me telling you that, but Well, where do your actions come from? Well, your actions, they come from every decision you've ever made. So in order for you to take an action, you have to make the decision to take the action. If every day I go for like a run and that's why I'm in shape, then every day I have to decide to go for a run, right? And so, you make the decision. And so your actions are the sum of your decisions, okay? These sort of binary option-based choosing thing that you do every single day. It's like what you have for lunch, who you hang around with, where you live, how you spend your money, where you go, who you see, what you read, what you listen to, what you do, what you don't do. All these decisions manifest as actions which create a reality. The next thing is, well, where the hell do your decisions come from? Because, what the hell, like these binary choices that we make every day, how do we make them? Where do they come from? Well, your decisions come from all of your perceived options. So, it's kind of impossible for you to make a decision if you don't perceive the option to make it. So, if you want to get rich and you want to make money, but you don't perceive that as a potential option because you've never known what rich means and you don't even know what the hell it means, then you don't even know it's an option. So, in order for you to make a decision to do something, you have to know you have the option to do it. So, it's kind of like this that example of someone who's always been fat, and they're like, they cannot make the decision to get healthy if they think that healthy isn't an option, right? Same thing with someone who wants to learn how to make money with this program. Like, if you believe, which by the way you'd be very wrong to believe, but if you believe that you're just not going to make it, then you don't perceive the option of trying, which means that you're not going to do it. So your decisions are the sum of your perceived options. But then the question is, well, where the hell do your perceived options come from? Like, what are these options? Like, where do these things come from? How do you possibly get them? Well, your perceived options, all these things, they come from your thoughts. So because what is an option is a thought, right? It's a string of information that encapsulates a component of reality in your consciousness, right? It's a pretty good way to define it, I think. On the rip, off the spot, not bad, nice and articulate. Stop patting myself on the back, it's getting weird, right? Anyway, been a long recording. So your perceived options come from your thoughts. Now, your thoughts are kicking around all over the place. You're not always going to have thoughts like options and stuff, but the way that you perceive an option is a thought because it manifests to you as a thought. Because you might have the thought of like, oh, maybe I actually can get rich. Maybe I actually can make money. Maybe I actually can do the work. Maybe I'm actually not afraid of rejection, right? These all start as thoughts, right? And so your perceived options. But then, this one, you're probably getting the theme here. Where the hell do those things come from? Like, where on earth do your thoughts come from? Because, to a lot of people, it just seems like, well, to everyone, really, it just seems like your thoughts just ping out of nowhere and they're just these random, these random wavelengths that just take you on a journey. But the thing is it's not, because if it was completely random, then your life would be completely random. But it's not, because your life is very predictable and you're a creature of habit and routine, and you execute on the same actions and you make the same decisions and you have the same options perceived all the time. And those things are similar to your family and your friends and the people you hang around. And like, your life is very predictable. And, if we know that your life comes from your thoughts because of your, these things, it's laddered down, then it can't be random, right? Well, your thoughts come from your paradigm. Because, the way that you, basically, in order for you to think, you have to have a subjective reality to think about. So whenever you're thinking about something, right? And when you're thinking about something, it's because you've got an image or, you've got this sense of reality, which is your subjective reality. And that's what you think about. So your thoughts come from your subjective reality. Imagine that, subjective reality is this massive big ball of energy, right? And things it's this big ball of energy that constantly creates new energy and it's self-fulfilling and it's just expanding and it's huge. And what happens is there's little cracks in this ball and energy's leaking out of the ball all the time. The little bits of energy leaking out, dripping out are your thoughts. Your thoughts come from your subjective reality. And your subjective reality ultimately comes from your paradigm because your paradigm kind of creates it, right? And So whenever you have a thought, you can only think about your subjective reality. It's impossible for you to have a thought about something that you don't know exists or don't believe to be true. Like it's near impossible, right? So then the question becomes, well, where the hell does the paradigm come from? Like, where's this? What was this thing doing here? Like, where is this? Is it God? Is it the universe? Is there some metaphysical sentient being that's come here, like given us consciousness? Well, this is simple. Your paradigm, you kind of have probably figured this one out by now. Your paradigm comes from all your beliefs. It's the sum of all your beliefs, right? And the question is then, well, your beliefs are just statements of perceived truth, right? And it's pretty simple. It's really simple. All these beliefs, all these things you believe to be true, they make up your paradigm, and that's where they come from. But then, okay, well, where the hell do your beliefs come from? Pretty good question, right? Well, as you might have gathered, they come from your experiences. It's impossible, right? Let me explain this. It is impossible for you to believe something without having experienced it first. Think about it, because you cannot form a belief about something, around or about something that you have not observed. And you don't have to observe it physically. Remember, it can be intangible, and it doesn't have to be in the present. It can be in the past or in the future or in the present, and it can be intangible or tangible, but your beliefs are formed from your experiences. And your paradigm is formed from your beliefs, and your thoughts are formed from your paradigm, and your options or perceived options are formed from your thoughts, your decisions are formed from your options, and your actions are formed from your decisions, and your reality, I'm just going to put here, reality. Your reality is formed from your actions. And so this is why I'm explaining this to you, because my objective here is to change your reality, but I can't change your reality without changing your actions. So I need to change your behavior, because this is basically your behavior, right? And how you act. But I can't change your behavior without changing your decisions, and I can't change your decisions without changing your perceived options, and I can't do that without changing your paradigm, and I can't do that without your beliefs, and then I have to change your experiences. Let me give you an idea that just came to mind as I was saying that. As a human being, what you are is a wave. You're a wavelength of consciousness, right? That's you experience the world through your consciousness, right? And all you're like a, how do I explain this? Because this is a big one. You have experiences, right? And what you are is a bundle of experiences laced together and tied together into something that you call life. And what you do is you go through life, imagine you're like a vacuum cleaner, you're like a Hoover. And you go through life, and everything you come into contact with, either in your imagination or in your physical senses, either in the past, present, or future, you kind of hoover it up. You collect it in this bag. And that bag, that vacuum cleaner bag that contains all of this stuff that you've hoovered up through your observation, that's your life. This bag that you can hold up with everything that you've collected so far in your life is basically like, that's your life. That's all your life is. It's just all your experiences. Like, think about that for a second. Just really deeply comprehend that for me for just a second here. I know it's weird to think you're a vacuum cleaner, and it's quite a comical analogy to use for such a serious point, but you're just a vehicle for experience. And what you do is, as you go through life, is you form beliefs to categorize your experiences, because if they just exist as experiences, that's just pure chaos. So you kind of have to form beliefs about experiences, because beliefs are kind of how you anchor yourself in the world. Like, without beliefs, without you knowing what's true or thinking what's true, like, life is just chaos. Like, you're just going to exist in, like, it's just a bunch of atoms flying around, right? So we use beliefs to map reality and essentially make it concrete and make sense of it, because without beliefs, like, we don't know like how we don't have anything to think about. This is why you create beliefs, is so you actually have stuff to think about and things to do and life. Like, consciousness kind of is beliefs, right? And then and then basically all of those experiences, they create your beliefs, and then you have your paradigm that creates your thoughts. Like, remember, your thoughts like spill out of your paradigm, create the options you perceive, inform your decisions, then you take actions, and then you form your life. And so you really are just like this experience machine. And you basically you take all these experiences, and all of these experiences aggregated together over time is just basically your life. If you ever wonder what you are, you ever try to ask yourself, like, what am I? What is life? It's just a collection of experiences. It really is. There's nothing more than that. It's the same premise in which a movie, like I said, is just a collection of frames strung together, or that a novel is a collection of words strung together. You're just a collection of experiences strung together. And up until now, there's a strong chance that you haven't had the best experiences, and that your experiences have been out of alignment with what you want to achieve. And you want to be more, and you want to be successful, and you want to be rich and happy and financially free, but you've never experienced that before. And so fundamentally in your mind, you have a lot of doubt and fear around whether it's actually possible, and that's why you're unsuccessful. Because if you're not taking the actions that you need, your behavior is not successful behavior, right? It is insofar as that you're starting to get it now by watching these videos and doing the action items and all these things, joining Easy Grow, whatever. Like, you're starting to get the hang of this action thing, and you're starting to make the right decisions, and you're starting to perceive options that you hadn't perceived before. And that is purely because your paradigm's changed, because by me giving you new information, I'm basically giving you new experiences. I'm educating you, and I'm giving you experiences in this training, which is creating your new beliefs, and everything is upstream of that, right? So now that you kind of get this, what I want to do is give you a little bit more insight into how experiences actually work. Because experiences, these things are the key. Because, like, how could it be any other way? Like, your life is an output, and your life doesn't just happen. It's tangible. You can see it. Not see it like physically, but you could like take every experience you've ever had, every conscious moment, you could string them out in a nice linear line and just observe them. You know how, like, in Interstellar, how, like, if you've seen Interstellar before, if you haven't seen Interstellar before, I suggest you watch it. But they create this dimension where the main character can perceive every single moment throughout time, and like every single little experience in these little packaged into these little time blocks. And that's kind of really how the mind works and how your life works. So to understand how your paradigm works, you need to understand how beliefs work. And to understand how beliefs work, you need to understand how experiences work. So what we're doing here really is basically getting to the bottom of this thing. And we're going to talk a lot more about your belief systems and how your belief systems form, and we're going to talk a lot more about your paradigm and where it comes from, and how to change it and how to fix it. And we're going to get into that in the next video. But for now, I want you to basically just comprehend the idea of experiences with as much accuracy as possible. So, okay, let's recap. What is a belief and how do they form? Or fix it, and we're going to get into that in the next video. But for now, I want you to basically just comprehend the idea of experiences with as much accuracy as possible. So, okay, let's recap. What is a belief and how do they form? Are we just born with them? Do they come out of nowhere? Are they random as they may seem? Well, we know this not to be true. A belief is a statement of perceived truth about a component of reality. Remember, beliefs exist in three forms. Okay, I'll highlight this in blue before my color-based OCD goes crazy. We have knowledge-based beliefs. Remember, knowledge-based beliefs are like what you believe exists. We have judgment-based beliefs, which is what you believe to be true about what you believe exists. And then we have self-image-based beliefs, which is what you believe to be true about yourself in relation to whatever exists, right? What you believe exists, or your judgment of that. Any belief that you have can be categorized into one of these three categories. Now, you can have many beliefs about a certain component of reality. Like, let's take a baguette, for example, right? You can have 100 beliefs about this baguette. That's a baguette. Knowledge, right? That baguette is light brown, judgment. I don't know how to bake a baguette. I was going to say I don't know how to take a baguette. That would be a very questionable thing to say in a business training that's as serious as this one. Anyway, self-image. Moving on, self-image. That baguette looks like a sword. Judgment. I don't know what sword, I mean, maybe a French sword, I don't know. My best friend would hate this baguette. Self-image. So, we see things, and then we start, judging them and identifying with them, and, forming knowledge around them, and that's how we perceive the world. But the question is like, well, where do these statements come from? Well, you should have gathered by now they come from experiences. So experiences are, but the question is like, well, where do these statements come from? Well, you should have gathered by now they come from experiences. So experiences are how reality manifests itself to us. And every experience exists in the mind. So even if you're looking at something, even if you're hearing something, smelling something, like we hallucinate reality as we experience it in our mind. So like this is a hard thing to gauge, but right now, the experience that you're having, this conscious thing of seeing things and hearing my voice, you're hallucinating this. It's real and it's physically there, but the only way that you're observing it in this little capsule that's your head is through hallucination, right? And this is pretty cool, this is consciousness, right? All experiences are subjective experiences. They are a projected image of reality filtered through our paradigm. And this is how they form, okay? So this is how experiences basically happen. So a component of objective reality exists. A human observes it with their 5 senses or imagination. So remember, it can be tangible or intangible, and it can be technically observed only in the present, but we can observe the past and the potential future. The observation is made through a paradigm, which is a collection of your belief systems, which is in essence your worldview and your identity as an aggregate, represented as an aggregate. A reflection of reality is created in the mind of the observer, like a mirror. And then this reflection is called experience. So thing exists, you look at the thing through a paradigm, it bounces back like a mirror, and then in your mind you see the thing, okay? Everything is an experience, everything. Every thought you've had, every dream, every time you open your eyes, listen, smell, touch, etc., every conversation, every moment, every second, for as long as you are conscious, you've had an experience. So the only time that you're not having experiences is when you're asleep and not dreaming. Anyway, people would argue that you're not conscious when you're dreaming, right? So, I'm not going to get into that, but basically, rule of thumb, for as long as you're conscious, you're having an experience, right? And it's not just when you go on holiday or try a new restaurant. So a lot of people think that like an experience is when you do something you've never done before, but it's not really the case. It's everything, everywhere, constantly stacked together, creating your life. Your life is just a string of experiences, one after the other, hallucinated in your mind, creating this thing that we call life. And remember that your experiences are filtered through your paradigm. So the question is like, really, like, well, how? Like, how are these experiences related to your belief systems? And why is it the case that your belief systems are the sum of your experiences? Well, this is really cool because we basically have 3 types of experience, okay? So when it comes to like having an experience, there's 3 different forms that it can take. So we've got initial experiences, confirming experiences, and denying experiences. So a initial experience is basically the first experience or impression of something. So the first time that you experience something and observe something, something you've never observed before, is the initial experience. Then we have the confirming experiences, and these are experiences that confirm. Well, this is really cool because we basically have 3 types of experience, okay? So when it comes to like having an experience, there's 3 different forms that it can take. So we've got initial experiences, confirming experiences, and denying experiences. So a initial experience is basically the first experience or impression of something. So the first time that you experience something and observe something, something you've never observed before, is the initial experience. Then we have the confirming experiences, and these are experiences that confirm your current impression or belief of something. And then we have denying experiences, which are experiences that deny your current impression or belief of something. So once you've experienced something, that's it, you've done the initial sort of experience stage, and from that point onwards, anytime you experience something related to that thing, you're either confirming or denying what you believe to be true, okay? Now, confirming experiences happen when we make an observation of reality and synthesize the information using our consciousness to confirm what we already believe to be true about the world. And denying experiences happen when we synthesize information and make an observation of reality and synthesize information to using our consciousness that denies what we already believe to be true about the world. So let's say, for example, that you think Trump is a bad person, and let's say that you watch the news and the news is saying that he is a good person. Well, that is a denying experience, right? And so every time that you see a piece of information, or every time you observe like objective reality, and sometimes the news isn't very objective to be honest, but every time you observe reality and make a subjective observation about something that you already believe to be true, it's either going to confirm or deny. Now, sometimes you can have neutral experiences where, it's neither here nor there, but it's usually almost always confirm or deny, right? So let me give you some examples. So let's say a knowledge-based belief. So remember, like, it's impossible for you to have a belief without an experience, because, how could it be any other way? Like, when you have an experience, that thing just happened and is real. And so from a knowledge-based perspective, like, if something is real, like, you believe it's real, right? And so let's take, for example, Bigfoot. So let's say that you believe that Bigfoot exists, okay? And the initial experience that has fed into this knowledge-based belief is you were skiing on holiday and you saw a big white figure when you were 13. And so to you, because you have seen this thing, in your mind, that has synthesized to you believing that Bigfoot exists. And so this belief has been born out of this initial experience, right? And so now, anytime that you have an experience related to Bigfoot, it's either going to confirm or deny. So let's say that you watch a documentary about Bigfoot and why he's real. Well, that's going to be an experience that confirms what you believe to be true. But then let's say that you go back to the same place, the same skiing place next year, and you don't see him. Well, that would be a denying experience, okay? So every time that you experience something, you're either confirming or denying what you believe to be true about the thing. But if you've never experienced the thing before, then you create a belief based on what you've observed, right? And we're going to talk more about this in the next video, but like, let's say that I sit in a chair outside, and it's my initial impression of that chair. And, and I sit in the chair, and let's say I think it's really uncomfortable. Well, that's my initial experience, right? So what that means is that from now on, every time I sit in a chair, unconsciously, or maybe not, it's going to be that, maybe it's not that deep, right? But every time I sit in a chair, I will be like, oh, this is a comfortable chair or an uncomfortable chair, at least in contrast to the one that I sat in that was uncomfortable. Let's take a judgment-based belief, right? So let's say that you believe that Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, which I believe, and I believe it is. And let's say the initial experience of that was in the school classroom when you were 10 years old and you had a geography lesson on Mount Everest. And so you received an experience in school about this, and because you experienced that, that sort of information, that judgment-based information, you now believe this to be true. And let's say that your friend, 20 years later, 30 years later, climbs Mount Everest and sends you a picture. And you think, God, that must be the tallest mountain in the world, it looks really tall. But then let's say that you watch a documentary, a conspiracy documentary, that says that China has a mountain that's taller, that's hidden away in secret. Well, now that would deny your judgment, right? Your belief might be brought into question, and you might change your belief, right? And let's take a self-image-based belief. So let's say that you think that making money online is hard for you, Well, let's say that you had the initial experience when you were a kid of your father telling you that making money online is a scam. And so, for you just believe it. It's a scam, and therefore you believe it's hard, and all these things get tied up. And let's say that you believe this, you believe it's hard, but you have hope, so you try, and you buy a dropshipping course, but then you get ripped off. And then you're like, oh, do you know what, I knew it. I knew making money online was hard, I knew my dad was right. It confirms, right? But hopefully, and I know this to be true if you do the work, this course is a denying experience for this belief. So you think it's really hard, I think it's really easy, I'm going to part with you information to make it easy, and that will deny your self-image-based belief. So here's how a belief forms. So you experience an objective component of reality and create a knowledge-based belief, therefore establishing what you think is true and exists, right? Based on your existing beliefs, biases, and perspectives, you will judge the experience you have just solidified into knowledge. And this is how judgment-based beliefs form. I need to actually change this to judgment. Okay? So you judge it, right? And then based on your existing identity and your existing beliefs, you will then identify with the experience you've just solidified and the judgments that you've just made about the knowledge. So, let me give you an example. The initial experience, right, is you go to Dubai and you visit the Burj Khalifa, right? So you visit the Burj Khalifa and your knowledge is you now know the Burj Khalifa exists. So let's say you didn't know the Burj Khalifa exists. By the way, if you don't know it exists, it's the tallest building in the world in Dubai. And let's say before coming to Dubai, you didn't even know it's a thing. So you visit, now you have new knowledge that exists, right? And then, whilst you're there, you judge the Burj Khalifa as the tallest building in the world. You look up and you think, yep, I knew it. That's the tallest building in the world. I've asked the guide, and he says it's true as well, so it must be true. And then, you identify potentially with it by saying that you like the design. So like, oh, I think it's really cool, or I love it, right? And that's how you've essentially formed an experience in this way, right? So you've had the initial experience, and now all of the things that you do here on regarding the Burj Khalifa are going to either confirm or deny the judgment or identity that you have, or maybe even the fact that it exists in the first place, I don't know. So another example, let's say that you go jet skiing for the first time. So your initial experience, you've never been jet skiing before, you never talked to anyone who jet ski before, so you have no knowledge of what it's like to jet ski whatsoever at all. Never even seen a video of it. So you do it for the first time, and now you know what it feels like to jet ski. So you have new knowledge, right? And then what's going to happen is you're going to judge the jet ski experience, and you might think, oh, the jet ski experience was fast, And then you're going to identify, and you could say, I am afraid, I'm never going jet skiing again, I'm really afraid of it, right? Then you've now created an experience around jet skiing, okay? And so, let's say that you see an ad to buy a jet ski. Well, you're not going to perceive the option to buy it because you think it's scary, you don't want to do it. And both of these instances are called initial experiences. And when this is where you experience something for the very first time. When you have initial experience, you essentially lock reality in place and take a stance and form these beliefs. So this is how we sort of solidify reality. We just lock it into place. Once we've had this experience and we form these beliefs, it's kind of impossible. Well, it's not impossible, but we don't intentionally, we don't really think about moving this. From this stance, you will now view the world and form future beliefs and opinions about reality that align with your new perspective. So let me give you an example. I went go-karting for the first time when I was, I think, 19, and I hated it. I wasn't feeling very well on the day, and the go-kart that I had, the steering was really faulty and really janky, so it didn't really work. And I basically kept getting lapped by my friends because I couldn't steer and I was just hungover. It was not nice. I had a bad experience with go-karting. Objectively, I was just probably terrible at it, right? But whatever. So I hate go-karting, with a passion. I really do not enjoy it at all. And the only reason I hate it is because my initial experience with it was bad. So first of all, I was hungover, felt like crap, and second of all, my friends took the piss out of me because my steering wouldn't work, and I kept getting lapped, and it was a nightmare, right? And I was hot, and I had to wear a suit, one of those go-karting suits. My helmet was too tight. It was not. I just didn't enjoy it at all, right? And now I just hate go-karting. And how this affects, I know this is a rudimentary example, but my reality is I will never go-kart because I hate go-karting, because my actions, I will never go go-karting because I will never make the decision to do it. I won't even perceive the option to do it. So, say for example that someone's like, oh, what should we do for your birthday? I won't even perceive go-karting as an option because I won't even think of it because my paradigm won't allow it, because my beliefs don't allow it, because my experience was bad. So I had a bad experience with go-karting, which means that I believe that it sucks and I hate it, which means that forms my paradigm. So the way that my subjective reality is manifested around go-karting is fuck that, which means that I think bad things about it, which means that my perceived options is I'm never going to do it, so I don't do it, and then I don't act it, which means I don't go go-karting. So I know that's just a bit of a weird example for go-karting, but the same thing is true for everything, money, everything, etc., etc., right? And when you have this initial experience, it really does just it just locks, your reality just kind of gets locked off. It's not to be too crude of an example, but it's like the sperm and the egg. and how the sexual reproduction process works for like human beings. Like, like once like one sperm gets into the egg like locks off and solidifies, and nothing else can get in. And it's like only that one sperm got in. And the same thing is kind of that's a bit weird. The same thing is kind of true with your experiences and your beliefs. Like, I don't care what anyone says. I'm not going go-karting, right? Like, I know how this stuff works, right? So I know that I could go-karting and probably get 2 or 3 lessons and then be good and have a good time and then enjoy it again. So you can change, your beliefs, and the way you change your beliefs is by changing your experiences and switching around, and it can be completely done. It's entirely possible. But for me, like, A, I hate it, so I don't want to do that, but it's just kind of stupid, right? But B, like, it's just not a problem. Like, I don't feel the need to fix go-karting. If, let's say that my say I had a son, and let's say that I had a son and he was 8 years old and he loved the idea of go-karts, and all he ever wanted to do was go go-karting. Well, then I'd go go-karting. I'd be like, fine, I don't hate it anymore. You can change your experiences, but you only change them when you need to, right? So here's the thing, right? Where was I? So here's the thing. When you have a new initial experience, your judgments and identity with it are formed in accordance with what you already have experienced and believe to be true. So every new initial experience that you have, so for example, this video, this course, anytime you meet a new person, any new experience you have, it's informed by your previous experiences. So it's not like every time you have a new experience, you have a fresh paradigm and a new way to look at it. That's not how it works at all. What you already believe to be true and what you already subjectively have in your reality will inform your new experiences, right? So let me give you an example here. So if you went jet skiing for the first time, you might think it's fast and scary, right? But if we took an F1 driver, so a Formula 1 professional driver like Lewis Hamilton, jet skiing for the first time, he'd form a knowledge belief. He'd be like, oh, I know what it feels like to jet ski. But then he would probably say that the jet ski experience was slow. And he'd probably say that jet skiing is boring. The reason he'd say this is because he's an F1 driver. So he's used to driving hundreds of miles an hour with his life on the line, being watched by millions of people worldwide. So to him, jet skiing is not this thrilling, fast thing. To you it is, because all you've ever known is just driving around within the speed limit, and just being like a normal person. So this is kind of like crazy to you. But as someone who's like has a high octane adrenaline job, it's just like another day. It's not even exciting. It's just like, oh, this is just normal, right? And so my point here is that depending on your point of reference and your past experiences and your past beliefs, it's incredibly likely that you observe something completely different to other people. And that also depends on your personality, your temperament, your conditioning, your psychology, all of these things that we'll talk about in the next video as well. Because this F1 driver has had different experiences too in the past, he has different beliefs, different paradigm, and so his perspective of the jet skiing experience is totally different to yours. In essence, it's almost like you've seen 2 entirely different things. Same thing applies to, like for example, here's an easy example. So my brother is 18 years old, and he obviously has me as this sort of entrepreneurial role model, and he really wants to start his own business when he's finished his A-levels, which is college, so sort of 6th form, whatever, end of high school, and he wants to start his own business. Now, whether he does or not, I don't know, but it's up to him. But the cool thing is that his perspective and paradigm on business is significantly more developed than someone else because he's seen me do it. So he's seen me, even though he was 10 years old when I started my businesses, he's seen me go from nothing to multi-8 figures. And because of that, because he's seen me become a multimillionaire, he sees things differently. So he actually believes it's possible. He just sees it's really hard work, and his perspective is he's quite lucky in that fact because he can see that it can be done. And so this is the difference between someone who has like an example in their life of someone who's done it. Same thing how if you grew up in a household where your parents are overweight and fat, and then that's kind of what and it's likely that you're going to be overweight. You're at sort of a health disadvantage. But if you grew up in a household where your parents are really fit and healthy, then you're probably going to end up being fit and healthy as well because they're going to lend you their paradigm, and you're going to perceive that as an option, right? Pretty important. So understand, every single belief you have in your life came from an initial experience. Beliefs don't just come out of nowhere and spawn in, right? They don't just magically appear in your life one day. They don't, right? Now, the only exception to this that I can find is the subjective account of religious experience, where people they can be going about their life and then they find God or Allah or Jesus or Ganesh. I don't know what people in other countries do, to be honest, but you get my point. Like I'm not going to get into the theological religious debate. It can become a bit touchy. So the one place this might not apply is with religion, perhaps not, maybe with like some other stuff as well. But mainly, for the most part, your experiences they came from somewhere, and where they came from was an input of information from reality. Okay. Once again, it can be sensory or it can be imaginary, but you had to, in order for you to have a belief, 99.99999% of the time, there had to be an experience that created it. It's just there's no other way. And if you're wondering what creates experiences, well, it's you, it's your consciousness. Like it's kind of like it's like an open loop. Like the input of your consciousness is your consciousness to a degree. Now we're not going to get into that because that's going to take like another 5 weeks to understand, but it doesn't seem that important, right? Every single new belief you form in your life will be based on and biased by your existing beliefs. So what people don't understand is like changing your beliefs is tough because you need to create new experiences. But when we talk about beliefs, a lot of people talk about limiting beliefs and how you have like beliefs that limit your capabilities and capacities to grow and expand. And what we find quite often and quite commonly is that a lot of people have these things, these root keystone beliefs that that really inform their paradigm significantly. And so let me give you an example, right? So person A, growing up, let's say you're person A. Your family didn't have any money, your parents weren't skilled enough to create financial success, or maybe they were in the Soviet Union or something like that. There's all sorts of reasons, but usually it's a skill issue. And I mean that with love. And let's say as a coping mechanism, your dad declared that money was evil, and that's why he doesn't have any. So growing up in your household, you were poor, and instead of your dad taking responsibility, he just coped and created some excuse saying that money was evil, right? And one day, it's 7 years old, you're with your dad, and you see a rich man in a sports car. So at 7 years old, you have no comprehension of money, you have no comprehension of buying power, you're just a 7-year-old, right? But at this point, your initial experience happens. Your dad declares the person in the sports car as the devil, and he says, son, no matter what anyone tells you, money is evil and it's bad. Anyone who has a lot should be ashamed of themselves. Now, you're 7, right? So you lack any critical thinking ability, and you're powerless against this statement. So you solidify it as a judgment based on your belief, and you start identifying with it. And so you believe that money is evil. Of course you do. It's no different from me showing you this thing here and asking you what this is. You're just stating what you see. Same thing with this blue square here. You're just stating what you see. You're not, like, you're 7 years old, for God's sake, at this point. I mean, depending on how old you are, right? But when you're an adult, it's a little bit inexcusable because, you develop critical thinking abilities, but of course you think money's evil. You're the main authority figure in your life has just told you something to be true. You're not going to question it. You're going to say, Dad, I'd like you to just break that down with a bit of Socratic reasoning for me, please, Father. Why don't I ask you that at 7 years old? No, you're not going to do that, right? So you basically develop a bias to money. You build this belief system. Your initial experience with money is that it's evil, okay? And what this means is this is how your life's going to run out, unless you change this. So we're going to represent this as a bright red circle. And as you go through life, you're going to have experiences related to money. So, the universe, the world is going to manifest to you, and things are going to happen, and things are going to happen to do with money, right? And so these experiences are simply manifestations of objective reality. They are things that just happen to you, they're not within your control. Before you've observed them, they don't mean anything to you, they're just components of objective reality. So let's say, for example, that your friend buys a Ferrari, or let's say you win the lottery, or let's say your landlord increases the rent, or a bank collapses, a bank in America, or a rich person dies. These are all events that they just happen, right? They're just objective reality just forcing itself onto you. They don't, before you look at them, they don't mean anything, they're not good or bad, they're not up or down, they don't have a meaning, it is what it is, right? But the second that these things enter your conscious awareness, you do the following. So first of all, you form knowledge-based beliefs to understand that the events have happened. So if your friend buys a Ferrari, then, and you see him in the Ferrari, then you say, oh, Frank bought a Ferrari. And that's a knowledge-based belief, right? No judgment, just knowledge. Now, then you judge the events to form judgment-based beliefs. So, Frank bought a Ferrari, what a dick, And then you identify with the events forming self-image beliefs. So I don't like Frank anymore. So how this would look is what was just objective and just happened with no meaning, as soon as it's observed by you or the person, they observe it through their paradigm. So their paradigm is, money is evil. It's a belief system, right? And so, if their friend buys a Ferrari, then they might form an identity-based belief, like, we're not friends anymore because what you've done is out of alignment with what I believe to be true about the world. Or let's say that you win the lottery and you think money's evil. Well, you might genuinely believe that this is a horrible burden. You might think, God, I'm now evil because I've got all this money. I've got to get rid of it. Or, let's say your landlord increases your rent. You might form the identity-based belief of I hate my landlord. And this is the thing, right? Is the reason that you form the belief is because of your paradigm. So because you think money's evil, your perception of this event is biased accordingly. So same thing with winning the lottery. Like, let's say that someone really thinks money is evil and they think it's the root of all evil and that it's the ultimate sin and terror. If that person wins the lottery, then that person will perceive the event of winning the lottery as a bad thing because their paradigm sees it as bad, because their existing experience, their initial experience is bad, right? And this is what I mean, by the way, when I say confirming experience and denying experience. So all you're going to seek to do is confirm this main experience here, this main belief system. And we'll talk more about that in the next video as well. And then let's say a bank collapses. So let's say there's another financial crisis and a bank collapses, and that this person might think, yes, justice was done today. This is a good thing, the bank's collapse. Let's say a rich person dies, like a billionaire CEO dies in a helicopter accident or a jet or something. And this person might think that's good riddance, I'm glad another billionaire's gone, right? This is the thing, is before this person observed these events, they were just objective events. There was nothing good or bad about them, but it was only by an observer with a bias looking at them that they became something, that they mean something, right? So now let's give another example. Let's take person B, and let's say that person B experiences the same events, right? But this time, growing up, there's person B, right? Growing up, you're moderately wealthy. Your parents were successful, and you enjoyed the fruits of their labor. One day, you're 9 years old, and you overhear your mother and father discussing this thing that you've never heard before called money. I don't know if you'd have heard of this by 9, but whatever. Let's say that your mother bought a lottery ticket and won a little bit of money, and they're celebrating and are really happy. And you think to yourself, money must be a great thing because my parents are happy about having more of it. And so in your mind, you're like, money is great, money is amazing, I love money, money's the best thing ever. And so when these objective components of reality manifest in your life, if your friend buys a Ferrari, you'll be like, what a legend. Or if you win the lottery, you'll be like, this is the best thing ever. And if your landlord increases your rent, you'll be like, dude, I get it, game's the game, you've got to make your money. If your bank collapses, you might think, God, this is terrible. Like that bank, I wish that, not your bank, but if a bank collapses, you might think, God, that's terrible. And if a rich person dies, you might think, what a shame that we've lost a billionaire, right? The question is, who do you think is more likely to get rich? So it's really, really fascinating how this, the argument you can make is the person who thinks money is evil could probably not want to get rich in the first place, but the unconscious doesn't really work like that. We tend to want what we don't have, right? And so, this is how we see reality. When something happens, you perceive it, and you form judgments about it, and you form identities about it. And those judgments and identities that you formulate and that you articulate and that you state to indicate what you've observed are based on what you already have observed and what you already hold to be true. And so you're like this sort of bias machine, basically. And then what happens is, all of these beliefs then go on to create more beliefs and more beliefs and more beliefs, and you kind of get this, this exponential cascade of beliefs based on one thing that happened when you were 7. And this really is how it goes, man. It's like just one small. You probably won't be able to remember. Like, we're going to do this in later videos. Where we isolate your key limiting beliefs, and we're going to talk about how like find them and like root them out and fix them and stuff. And we're going to do it. And it's going to be amazing. It's going to change your life. But just know that all of your literally it's this ladder here. Your reality is the sum of your actions, which is some of your decisions, which is some of your options, which is some of your thoughts, which is the sum of your paradigm, which is the sum of your beliefs, which is the sum of your experiences. And every single belief had an initial experience, and what happened is that initial experience was confirmed repeatedly. And we're going to talk more about confirmation as we move on to the next video. So my point is this: every belief that you hold near and dear to your heart can be traced back to an initial experience. It didn't just happen. It didn't appear out of nowhere. It can be traced back to a real-time, conscious experience that you had probably when you were a lot younger. And likewise, if you've ever changed a belief, it was because you experienced something new. And what you would have experienced is a denying experience. And we'll talk about that. So that's basically this video. I know it's been a bit heavy, and I appreciate you bearing with me. It took me 3 months to make this. And it took me so much suffering to produce this thing. Like, trying to think this stuff through and bring it back to first principle and define it in the simplest form possible has been honestly one of the hardest things that I've ever done. This is one of the hardest videos I've ever made. And the next few will be as well, I think, because they're all of a similar nature. But we talked about objective reality, how you observe it, what subjective reality is. We talked about your paradigm. We talked about the black flower analogy and how your paradigm can vary from other people. We talked about the reality ladder, how you experience experiences, and we kind of explain what experiences are and how they go on to form our belief systems and basically create our ultimate reality. And I hope that this video has given you some fresh perspective on how we see the world, and I'm pretty sure that I've hopefully brought you a little bit closer to being all-seeing and omniscient. So I will look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for watching.
ship's tight.